The Angstadt Arms Vanquish is an integrally suppressed 9mm carbine. It is offered in both 1-stamp and 2-stamp gun configurations. We're going to be evaluating the 2-stamp gun, which is built around a 10.5-inch short barrel rifle. Consider the 1-stamp gun roughly equivalent, but with a 16-inch barrel. What makes this interesting is the nature of its suppression. The suppressor portion is a tube that has been fastened over the barrel, and the barrel has been ported throughout its length. This accomplishes a couple things. First of all, there is no chance of a baffle strike because there are no baffles to strike. Secondly, those ports are cut in such a way as to vent pressure and knock the velocity of a standard pressure load down, eliminating the need for premium subsonic ammunition. And lastly, it makes maintenance virtually unnecessary. As far as the rest of the rifle is concerned, as we have come to expect from Angstadt Arms, it's basically a work of art. Ambidextrous 45-degree safety, Radian Raptor charging handle, extended paddle on the mag release, monolift and weight-reduced forward rail with 4-sided M-lock and forward QD points that extends over the can as to shield your hand from heat buildup, and then is finished out with a complete set of B5 furniture. This weapon is equipped with last round bolt hold open and runs off of Glock magazines, and it ships with 2. Today's going to be slightly different in format than we've done in past reviews. I'm going to front load you with all of the testing footage, let you draw your own conclusions, and then we will regroup and discuss the findings and mix them with critiques. All right, so the question is, do those ports impact accuracy? I think that's a reasonable question. We're going to shoot 10 rounds of 115 grain, and I'm going to be using a Gideon LPVO with no rear bag. Group 1, Group 2. I know what your next question is. Kurt, do those ports that are drilled in the barrel actually reduce the velocity? Do they actually work? And if they do work, then to what degree do they work? Well, very simple test. We have a brand spanking new chronograph out here, so special thanks to all of you who have contributed on Patreon and memberships. You made that purchase possible. The last one didn't die a horrible death or anything. It just really needed replaced. And after about 10 years of doing this, it definitely needed to go to bed, so to speak. So we're going to start off with first 115 grain. These are the Fiocchi loads, and they should be doing about 1,200 feet per second. So here we go. 5 rounds. 1132. Now we're going to add just a little bit of weight in a 124 grain. This is also Fiocchi, and it is stated velocity of 1,200 feet per second. Also, no subsonic loadings today. We want to test the manufacturer's claim of will it bring down the velocity of a standard pressure load in 9mm so that you don't have to buy that super expensive premium subsonic ammunition. 1157. Welcome to the darkness, folks. It's actually pretty nice out here right now. We have heavily overcast with just a little bit of moon up there. I don't have a barrel length that is comparable to this rifle here. So what I've done is I've brought a Glock 19 out here that's also suppressed, and the Henry Homesteader up there, which is 16 inches. So we should have a relative comparison on either side of this 10-inch barrel. And going hot. The last test that we're going to do today is the wet test, and it's actually going to be a comparison test. Purpose of adding water or another ablative material to your can is to increase the surface area inside the can, and that ablative material also creates a heat sink, so it's going to cool that gas down. So again, the prime function of a can is to sequester the gas, cool it down, slow it down, and release it slowly. So adding ablative material is good for several dB, a noticeable difference in performance of any can with an ablative material in it. The thing about ablative material is that it burns off pretty quickly. You're good for a couple shots usually. Well, the manufacturer claims that because of the way they've done this, that the ablative material lasts considerably longer. So what we're going to do is just a comparison test between the Vanquish and that Glock 19. I've added the requisite amount of liquid, 1 ounce as per the manufacturer's guidelines. We're going to be shooting subsonic ammunition today. This is the only subsonic ammunition that we fired the entire testing series. And the reason we're doing that is this should be super quiet, and we should be able to see some kind, or at least hear some kind of difference as the ablative material burns off. So let's go ahead and get to it. Glock 19, Obsidian 9. We're gonna shoot off the plate. All right, I've started to get a little bit. We'll keep going. Okay, I think you guys can hear that. And I am absolutely filthy right now. But in the 30 rounds, definitely achieved that burn off. So let's swap over to the Vanquish and see how it does. Okay, so that sounded pretty good. You can still see the water cloud coming out of the end of it. Okay, I just started to get it. And that was the last round. Yuck. Alrighty, boys and girls, it is time for results and critiques on the Vanquish. How did it do? What did we find? And what do I have to say about it? Well, I think the best place to start, the most logical place to start, is going to be with that night test, the flash test, if you will. Because I think it's apparent to everybody who watched the video that that test is not where most dropped it. Now passing the drop test, because I think it's apparent to everybody who watched the video that that test is not where this excels. And to be completely honest, I knew that before I ever even shot the gun. Because for all intents and purposes, as it relates to flash, this is a flow-through can. And flow-through cans absolutely suck in general. But as it relates to flash, they do not do it well. It's a system of trade-offs, just like everything else. In this instance, I can literally see the tip of the barrel sticking out of the end of the can. There is nothing really to moderate what's coming out of the muzzle. And I can think about a couple things to improve upon that. There's a couple ideas that are around it up here. The first would be to put some kind of flash reducing geometry on the end of the tube here. The other thing that could possibly be integrated is a baffle or two inside of the tube body itself, so like right inside there, like the first inch or so inside of the tube, we add a baffle or two that's going to redirect that gas out, so it gives it kind of an internal muzzle brake effect, so that last little expansion that would normally come out of the end of the barrel is then redirected through the volume of the can. That may or may not work. The other thing that is perhaps a little bit wonky is you could simply just add an extra, half inch of thread to the end of the barrel, and then you could put whatever muzzle equipment you wanted on the end of it, including another suppressor. But that's beside the point. There are plenty of things that Angstadt could address as far as going after that flash signature. There's definitely some room for improvement there, and all of those ideas that I listed are not like crazy cutting edge technology that has to be completely re-engineered or anything like that. They're simply augments and perhaps even future SKUs that they could add to the project. Accuracy. The accuracy of this firearm is just fine. There doesn't seem to be any kind of interaction between those ports and the bullet, or at least, there doesn't seem to be any adverse interaction. If there was, then we would see some crazy stuff downrange. When we shot the accuracy, we were shooting that at 50 yards, and it's plenty of space for us to see any kind of cattywampus effects that could be imparted on the bullet by, I don't know, part of the bullet getting torn off as it passes one of those ports. The way I know that is, first, all of the bullet holes in the paper are nice and round. We would see keyholing or something like that, and we would see a much larger group, maybe even crazy flyers that are missing at that kind of distance. When you see that kind of damage to a bullet from internal ballistics, you usually see feet of deviation, and that's not what we saw in this case. Velocity. Now, this is the one that I think was most interesting to me, because I just really wanted to see how they executed on this, because you'll notice that those ports are threaded, so you could potentially fill those ports in if you wanted to jack the velocity back up. That said, the velocities that we got were in the transonic range most of the time. Now, it has been pretty hot here. When I went out to test the gun at night, it was about 50 degrees instead of closer to 90 degrees. And those rounds were definitely under the sound barrier. So again, I'm calling it the transonic range, but those Fiocchi loads are pretty hot. And if you compare the data that we took with the data that Angstadt publishes, it seems to kind of all be right in line. If you're shooting, bullcrap bulk loads, then you're probably going to be safely under that sound barrier. That said, I don't have a 10.5 inch 9mm SBR, as I mentioned, so I took the liberty of taking the Glock 19 and that Henry Homesteader out there and chroning them on the same day. And what we ended up with was velocities out of a 10.5 inch barrel, that were 60 feet per second, lower than the Glock 19. If there was no or negligible effect of those ports in the barrel, then we would expect to see velocities that were somewhere between the Glock 19 and the Henry Homesteader. So somewhere between 1200 and 13 some, but instead we actually ended up lower than the Glock 19. So definitely there is an internal ballistic effect. And then lastly, the wet test. Now, this one was the one that I was the most surprised about, because I was pretty skeptical about this. And what really contributed to my skepticism is that you can't pour an ounce of water into this can. It runs out the bottom. It will not contain a full ounce of water, whereas you can take a full ounce of water and put it in a traditional can. Because there are individual chambers in there, it will sequester that liquid in the can. However, even though this holds less water, it stayed quieter longer. And I believe that the reason, or at least my postulation, my hypothesis, if you will, of why this stays quieter longer is because there is no direct interaction between the liquid in the can and the actual bore of the gun. In order for it to find itself into the bore of the gun, it then must traverse back across those tiny little ports that are drilled in the barrel, and that is going to be a diffusive thing. Instead of in a traditional can, it can just directly interact with the bore and just be washed right out constantly. So yeah, that absolutely worked. And I actually have something pretty interesting to show you from that wet test. I'm going to point this out for later in the critiques. Well, that's all I have to say about the Vanquish. This was a really cool project. Very, very interesting. It's nice to see companies that are still willing to push the envelope and go outside the box, particularly when the commercial viability of iterative work is so high right now. So definitely cool work from Angstadt Arms. I've been looking to get a hold of one of these things for some time. So I would like to know what you guys think in the comment section down below. And I'm out of here.